everything is an investment in something else. So always having that something else going on in the back of my mind to kind of help recenter me, repull me back, doing what I can that way to try and not let it become too much just noise.
You're listening to the AV Amplifier. Each week, we'll feature voices and ideas that need to be amplified in the higher education and pro AV IT communities. This show is brought to you by higheredav.com. And now here's your host, Ryan Gray.
Well, hello again, everybody. Thank you for tuning in again to the AV Amplifier. My name is Ryan Gray, and I am. It is my pleasure to come every Wednesday with content to refresh your feed in your podcast app at higheredav.com or on YouTube. And if you're joining us today on YouTube, you'll get to check out with our guest today a background environment that screams AV person to me for like 3 different reasons. So before we dive into that, Chris, thank you for coming back for week 2 and being willing to stand up to a whole barrage of more questions. Please remind everybody who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Chris Kelly. I'm the one of the senior IT support specialists here at Creighton University. Our primary campus is in Omaha, but then we have campuses, a campus down in Phoenix and down in the Dominican Republic. So working on classroom AV, PCs, all that sort of thing.
Nice. And then you moonlight as the advisory board's chair for the Higher Education Technology Managers Alliance.
Yes, that is my more professional gig.
Yeah, exactly. That's your
trying
Batman role.
Trying to maintain the advisory boards and make sure that we have ideally weekly meetings with sponsors and getting us connected with people in ways that we otherwise would not.
Cool. Well, if you don't know what we're talking about, hit pause, run back to last week's episode because you definitely, hear what that whole advisory board thing is about, and then you can pick right back up here. So if they say a picture paints 1,000 words, and one of the fun things these days is in the world of Zoom and that sort of thing, what people's backgrounds are, who uses a fake one and a real one, who tries to cultivate it and who doesn't, who's willing to whatever. But here's what I see. First, there's a corner of a television. There's like a corner of a display on the wall. We got a whiteboard. I can't read it, but I'm assuming there's going to be tasks or other things that have to be looked at. There's definitely a projector hanging on the ceiling, and then a shelf, which we all have, the gray metal shelf with the particle board shelves on it with some random gear, and then a wall painted, which I am going to assume is the Creighton Blue Jays blue. Am I seeing this right?
You are. This is my actual behind me. I tried to mess a little bit with the blurring. I just couldn't get it to look decent, especially with this kind of headset. So yeah, it's the space has been used for different things over time. This is sort of a generalized one of our IT spaces here at Creighton. This is in the Chris building complex, no relation.
Yeah.
So we've got here and then a few other spaces across campus where we have our IT folks posted out. But yeah, I don't know when that projector would have last been used. And the shelves are mostly for computer refreshes that would be going out to spaces.
But that's like, it's such a, like, I think everyone could look and go at a building at my institution. There is a room that looks almost exactly like that. And it also has a projector in it that I have no idea when the last time it was used. Like, of all the ways that were similar and different, like, I think everyone has that exact thing in it, and it makes people feel right at home. You go visit other campuses and you're like, oh yeah, it's this room. You know what I'm saying? It's your pseudo storage prep, this. People use it as an office. It can be anything anybody needs on any given day.
Just show me your this room.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I feel underprepared as I didn't bring you a Grammy for your rapping performance on episode 95.
Dude.
I feel like that would have been, very called for.
So,
or even something for your 100th episode.
I mean, first, how dare you try and take over the show? I will ask the questions here. I don't know who you think you are.
That was a statement.
That was like, I explained a little bit what that was, but it's been a little bit of a Rorschach test because that thing's sitting out there and it is very out of so it's been interesting people who've mentioned something and people who haven't mentioned something about it because it's out there. My intent after I did it here at YC was that it would never see the light of day again. But then around here, people kept asking for it. So I was like, all right, fine. But I'm putting it in my own context before I just let this video. Sorry, this show is not about me, but yeah, the YC marketing people asked me, like, oh, could you send that? We'd love to put a couple of clips up on our social media. No. I mean, they're 12 years. You know how many times they've said, how many awesome things my teams have done here over there. They've never asked to clip that stuff and put it on the social
the thing
media.
You're known for.
Make an idiot of yourself in your front. Like, I was like, what I'm saying? What's going to attract students? The IT people acting like tomfoolery, but I was still kind of flattered about it. So what are you going to do? So anyways, thank you for mentioning that. And
well done.
Thank you so much. If you don't think that I can't bust a rhyme, then like you said, episode 95. And
that beats.
Yeah, exactly. It may or may not finish with a drop the mic drone shot from the roof of the Performing Arts Center. So that's all I'm saying. Well, thank you for bringing that up. Okay. One of my standard questions for people, and ironically, it's because I was trying to figure out how to relate to people by my own context, because again, I am the only one I truly care about. But that was a joke. Everybody is allowed to laugh at that. And someone of your background probably could speak about this for a little while. But do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
I would consider myself an introvert.
Introvert. Why?
As much as there's mixed communication about what those terms kind of actually mean, and there's no all or nothing, as you have very much said yourself. I like and recharge from my more low-key, intimate, private moments. So the moments where I'm with fewer people on a deeper level, and there's not so much of the noise going on around, where I'm not trying to, maintain 20 conversations. There's definitely a time and a place for that. But after not a whole ton of that, I am going to need a recharge. And my recharge is definitely not being in that room full of people.
Yeah. So, I know that like sometimes the answers to these may seem simple, but in our world, you're involved in AV, you're obviously a very people forward person. You're going to be out and about on campus. You're going to work in places where there's a lot of people. You talked about going to InfoComm, which is just like an overload of human interaction all the time. What are your strategies for taking care of yourself and knowing what you need to do, when you are in those types of environments?
Everything is an investment in something else. So doing the things that you're not going to like everything you do, and plenty of the things you like it in moderation, but finding ways to, whether it's zoning out my cell phone for a little bit, or thinking about how I might apply this in another way. Always having that something else going on in the back of my mind to kind of help recenter me, repull me back. Doing what I can that way to try and not let it become too much just noise.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like find a way to, I'm stuck in this place of the entire world is just how our brain chemicals make us perceive it, but knowing what to do to change your brain chemical mix to change some of that stuff is just, it feels like a superhero weapon once you can understand your own, version of that.
Well, and I like the concept of challenges and pushing myself and doing none of a lot of what I've done. Heck, changing jobs, complete career change 2 years ago, like those are not things that I would have anticipated 3 years ago. But just seeing it as a challenge to go out and push myself to do it, a lot of times I can get enjoyment out of the things, even if I'm super anxious going into it. But doing those challenges because if everything is just the same, predictable, not causing anxiety, then you're going to get really bored.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. You're totally right. And you brought up again, we talked a little last time, and you mentioned there sort of like things you wouldn't have anticipated 3 years ago or whatever, and talking about like kind of making a big decision to jump career tracks. So when you are looking at a big decision like that, is it more of a like a gut feeling that something needs to change, or is that an analytic? Like, did you have a pro and con list for that, or more of a like, not this feels right or this feels wrong, and I'm just going to do what I need to do?
Well, and I had the benefit, you know, I'm a white man in middle America. I can find a job usually.
Yeah.
But I had the job, or I had the benefit of looking for a job while I had a job. I knew that at worst, maybe I would have paid for some certifications. And if I did not get a job that allowed me to change over, I could have made it. Like I could have kept doing what I was doing. I wasn't out anything except for the cost and time of the certifications. Like I was doing fine at my other job. It's not like I couldn't have done it. I just wasn't necessarily happy.
Right. So it afforded the, because sometimes people think like big life changes require, and probably because same thing, like movies and narratives will be like, they encourage that, just like close your eyes and take the jump and the leap of faith. And that paralyzes people into not being able to do that, because you go, well, there's too much uncertainty in that. So you sort of were able to build a comfortable way of having enough predictability, you know what I'm saying, to put your toe in and make a transition rather than that.
I had the safety nets that a lot of other folks don't have. I was able to take a little bit of a hit pay wise
Yeah.
to make the transition. And I was able to, work on my certs while I was doing my other job. I was able to, you know, put plenty of apps out there to try for things, knowing that I'm going to be all right until I can or can't make the transition.
Right. Right. And I like that, like, you know, having a plan and going down the road. But you mentioned something that's interesting, because I did the same in my career at one point, which is took a pay hit to make a change that was 100% the right thing. And it's one of those things, like how many people you talk to that have that say that, right? Like, because it's so unexpected. People love to change jobs, but how often do you do it for less money than you did before? And how many people are glad that they did in retrospect? So like that, the question there is there, do you think people are missing opportunities by using that as a prerequisite for job changes? Or is it just a matter of an individual person sort of values when it comes to considering a move like taking less money to do something different?
Totally depends upon the situation because, again, I have enough of a safety net that I can afford to do that. For a lot of other people, they maybe can't afford to take a pay cut. They may be, making it on the loans and whatever that they've got that they can't afford to make that change at that point in their life. Um, I've been, I've had good benefits of, between my family and my wife and just all the different things that, and luck. I've had luck on my side that I've been able to make those changes and that I could take those hits when I needed to take those hits for the investment in something better.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone has.
Yeah. But I like, it's fun when people get to share their various stories about things like this, to open up, it's like the possibilities and the things like that. So, um, this is kind of a question that I like to ask, but sometimes people can't answer it because it takes some level of thing. But thinking back, is there a day in your life that like was really consequential, but that you didn't know that it was at the time?
Uh Hard to say. When I moved out of mental health counseling, like at the state hospital, um, there were truly some days where I worried for my life.
Hmm.
And you can only take so much of that.
Yeah.
I mean, we would I mean, the things that you see and do there and the way that people threaten your lives and they might be 300 pounds on you and you might be stuck alone in a room with them and they think that the injection that you're going to give them is going to kill them. Like they are fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
Um, Doing that for so long and then just being like, okay, I can't like have every day kind of be risking my life in one way or another.
Mhm.
And depending upon the patient and the state that they're in, it might be a while until they get to a point where they're not going to be kind of doing that every day. I think just getting to a point where realizing like can't do that every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So that feels a little like something you're like you there's a change versus comfort. So, sorry, I like to talk about things with people in life change, and usually the struggle is change versus comfort, right? Like I'm comfortable where I am, and the change will be uncomfortable. But this is one of those examples of the inverse, whereas there's something about the status quo that is creating enough comfort that it almost seems like then that change it becomes inevitable. Like you had to do something different.
Yeah, and that's when I changed over to child protection, which was
Yeah.
in
But
a whole
a
different
whole
way.
other level of, yeah.
Yeah, but at least it was much less life threatening for me than at that point.
Yeah. So when it and again we can go, but yeah, in the world of like child protection and things like that, like and even I mean even relating to your work now, um, they're like I'm hesitating because I'm going to show some level of ignorance, and so I'm trying to not worry as much when I do that. But like my little interaction with things in the world of sort of child protection and things that have happened, there's a duality there of like processes and paperwork. There are things that have to get done. You know what I'm saying? There's a caseload, there's whatever, and then there's also like the human part of seeing children in distressing or dangerous situations that, like you said, maybe it's not your life in danger anymore, but you're dealing with people whose lives may be in danger. So how did you deal with sort of am I right in that duality of like, it feels like there's a bureaucratic layer sitting on top of a very emotionally driven human experience? Is that what that was like?
So depends upon the part of it. So a lot of the folks that I worked with, they were wonderful, super caring individuals that every single one of them hated the paperwork, the reports, that kind of stuff. Like they lived and thrived on the helping people part of it.
Yeah.
Um, I likely largely got promoted because my brain thrived more on the expected the paperwork. Like I could make a spreadsheet and I could fill out documents and I could write a court report to save. And I was great when I feel like I was usually pretty good when I had to testify on the stand and handling court type situations. Um, but I never probably connected with the human side of it as well as some of the people that I worked with. I did all right. The counseling stuff definitely helped with that, but they were all like in tears a decent amount of the time and just a lot more emotionally connected with people. None of them were like, okay, I'm just here for filling out the paperwork. Like everyone's just a number. No one's actually like that. So
Did you ever feel like that part of it inhibited the work, or like what you were trying to do was strike a balance in between like what has to get done? I don't know. You can see I'm I think I'm trying to inject myself into it and understand it in a way that probably like you're looking at me like you're not actually listening to what I'm saying.
no, I
You know what
think
I'm
you're a
saying? Like
very, I think you're
yeah,
curious about it,
yeah,
and you just on your, you want to know more things about it.
yeah. It's scary to me because I'm the same way where there are places and times with human things where I have to just go, I can't expose myself to that because I don't think I'll be able to actually deal with. I can know that there's distress over there, but if I see it, it will take over and then feeling bad about saying, oh, am I protecting myself from it? So here I am, like I was almost trying to make you my therapist there for a second. That's probably not the right thing to do. Talk me through what's wrong with my brain, if you could, please.
Got that much time, Ryan?
Oh, burn, burn. All right. All right. Let's change topics then. What is the highest height you've ever jumped from?
So I have a bucket list thing that I'm working on, which is actually going to the high point of every United States state.
Mm-hmm.
So every state has some natural point that is the highest for that state. Fortunately, most of the ones that I've done have not been too bad. Only a couple of them have required any actual, like, pulling yourself up kind of climbing.
Right.
There will be eventually some that require a bit more of the actual, like, rappelling and that kind of thing. Um, Probably while I was climbing Mount Totten in Maine, the end of the
Hmm.
Appalachian Trail, there were some rocks that you just part of the course that you really had to kind of pull yourself up from and get really narrow for kind of shimmying your way through.
Oh my
So
gosh.
probably jumping off of some of those, maybe 10-ish feet or so. I mean, still never huge, but um, it became easier to jump than to try and have my pack and my gear go through some of the places on the way back down.
Wow. But yeah, that kind of jumping from that height, that's very different than, the high dive or a cliff into water. That was one step amongst a longer journey, and one too that like an ankle injury would be a big problem up there versus, other places.
Yeah, that was a long trip for that one. That hike ended up being about 17 and a half hours, I think.
Wow. Okay, so where did this bucket list of, going to the highest place? That's a pretty adventurous type thing to have. Where did that desire come from?
You know, I was trying to look for more reasons to travel, ways to have things to cross off. And every state has a something, they have a whatever. But this was one of those that there's a clear, you know, distinct high point of every state. It was just a way to say, okay, I've done that thing and I really enjoy nature and I like the challenging myself. So this was a way to get all those things together. And seen amazing things that never would have seen before, going places that you would never go. A lot of them are very rural, and just getting out and seeing and doing things that never would have happened.
That's awesome. You could have chosen like the best waffle place in every state too, though.
That becomes pretty arbitrary.
It's true.
This is one of those that it's like, despite
That's true.
some of them have a little bit of like arguments about it, like Colorado is known for Mount Elbert, the actual high point, versus Mount Massive, which is only not that many feet shorter, and people have tried to like actually stack
Prove one.
rocks on one of them to make it taller than the other. Like there's a whole community behind this.
I love that. You're like, I'm Team Mount Massive, and you're literally like hiking more rocks up to the top to build it higher and higher.
Just the name Mount Massive, and I
I
think at one
know.
point they considered that the highest one, but then they actually did measuring and found out that Elbert was in fact actually taller.
That's funny. So what you're saying is to be comfortable with something, you'd like it to be really grounded in a concrete measure that everyone can agree on rather than thriving in an area of ambiguity.
Look at you using that psychoeducation there. Big words too. Yes.
So, well, that's a helpful clue. You know what I'm saying? So, all right. Um, it's a little early to start the last three questions, but you threw a challenge earlier that I dodged at the time. So I'm going to be very curious if this is correct or not. But my assessment from just this is ISTJ.
Close.
Okay.
INTJ.
Really? Okay,
Yes.
talk me through then the N versus S, because there are things in some of your answers that could go either way, but actually I put that one down early. So maybe I put that down too early and I was focused on the wrong thing.
I forget a lot of the differences between the two, but I've definitely
Hmm.
looked at both of them, and just the intuiting side of things usually seems to be more the way that I approach things.
Yeah, I can see it because there's like, yeah, what I'm confusing is a little the J part. So like, again, it's not so subtle, but the structure, you know what I'm saying? Finding value in the structure is a J thing. But I
Hmm.
also associate it a lot with the sensing type versus the intuitive type. But that's my bias on it, right? Because I'm a very strong N intuitive. Like it is always the next big possibility, you know what I'm saying, on the horizon, and throw everything else out the door. Let's look at that new cool thing we could do. Let's just go do that. You know what I'm saying? So I
But
think
I'm
my
super
bias is to, to see
I'm
it that
super
way.
planful with all of it though.
Right. Yeah.
Like anything that I do that I can, like we have a vacation coming up to
Hmm.
Colorado where I'll actually climb Mount Albert. Um,
Nice.
and we have a spreadsheet breaking it down to the 15-minute increment for all of the week and a half of where we'll be, roughly how long we plan to spend at each thing, the driving distance between each thing. You know, that's that's what we've got.
By the 15-minute increment.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens when the plan starts to go awry?
I build in some time for, slight variations. Um,
so,
and
so
I
look,
drive a
we can
little
be
bit
a minute
faster.
off here or there. What? I'm super
Um,
chill about it.
I don't know if
Sorry.
this is beneficial or not. I could even try and share it so you can
Okay.
see uh, screen. And does that come up for you?
Yes. I don't think anybody's ever done this on the show before.
So it's right after the Chicago Road Show. So I'm hitting the Chicago Road Show.
Yeah, me too.
Uh,
Sweet.
And then I've got each of the things kind of broken down by the location, the distances, and
Nice.
where we're going. Actually, down here, another tie-in that we have, when I'm in Santa Fe, Suki is coming over.
Hey, that's right.
Yes.
That's
So
right.
she'll come to Meow Wolf and hang out in Santa Fe for us for a day or so.
Cool. Santa Fe's on my wife and I's list. I've never really spent time. I've been through there a couple of times, but it is one of those towns where I was just like, we've got to go and spend some time there. Okay, well, I will take you at your word. That spreadsheet planning looks way more sensing type than intuitive type to me, but it's because I'm sensing intuiting is not about how you process something, but how you see up. So I'm putting that in there. Okay, so I was 75% right then. It was a straight up
Well done.
cheat to ask, you know what I'm saying? Are you an introvert or an extrovert? But I ask that all the time of everybody anyways. And lots of people who are extroverts answer introvert because they go, well, I do need rest and stuff like that. Like, yeah, extroverts do too. But the way you're describing what it is isn't the same thing as recharge versus, so anyways.
Well, and there's just so much social ambiguity about that term and so much
For sure.
cliche and
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of stuff gets lost from what the Myers-Briggs actually is kind of looking at there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I would love. So we should do a deep dive on that, right? Because the Myers Briggs 4 letter thing is actually just an abbreviation for a whole other level of cognitive stacking, right? So you're an I or an E based upon whether the first process in your cognitive stat was outwardly focused or inwardly focused, not necessarily a description of yeti. I love that stuff. So
Well,
we
and I
should do that.
fortunately had some time to do some deeper dives into some of that during grad school because when we
Nice.
were looking at some of that personality stuff.
Cool. Okay, same last 3 questions for everybody. Third to last question is: what is a question you wish people would ask you, but nobody ever does?
You know, I'm I'm not sure how much everyone kind of has those things that they're like super points of fascination. A lot of times we talk about it with neurodiversity, where people kind of have their almost their fixations, their things that they know all the things about.
Yeah.
Um, the climbing the high points thing and the high
Yeah.
points thing in general, that's just one of my things. Like I could talk with someone about that for days, but that's just not a thing that most people have much of a concept on because besides like, oh, hey, that's a high mountain over there.
Right.
So no, that's one of those things that I can really kind of nerd out about.
Nice. Well, I was a little preoccupied earlier because I was trying to do 2 things at once, which was figure out your Myers Briggs and listen to the answers. But I meant to ask so, of the 50 states, how many are down? How many to go?
I think at this point
Are you consulting a spreadsheet again?
I do have a spreadsheet for that.
Yeah, I know. That's fun. I'm not making fun of
Um,
that. I've
no, I
become
wanted to
way more
be
of a
at least
spreadshirt person as I've gotten older.
fairly. I mean, I also have it as it's a less exciting part of visiting every state capital.
Yeah.
So going to the state capitals of each of those places, just as things to collect. So I believe I'm somewhere around half-ish.
Okay.
A lot of them are pretty easy. The hardest ones, like the top 10, I've only done like one of the top 10,
Yeah,
which
because
was
getting the highest place
Katahdin.
in Kansas is way different than Colorado, and they're next
Yeah,
to each other. So yeah,
yeah. Mount Sunflower out in Kansas is just a field. Same with the Iowa one.
yeah.
It's just someone's property that looks pretty.
So I'm assuming Arizona has to be San Francisco Peaks. It's got to be near by Flagstaff,
Is it Humphrey? Is that the name
not
of the
Humphrey.
one?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Right there.
So as I went up to Phoenix not too long ago to work at our campus, and we actually went up to the Grand Canyon and drove around Humphrey because we didn't have time to climb it at that point. But
Yeah.
I definitely need to make it back there, and it's obviously very near you all, and we'll decide when we need to go and climb that one. But it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Arizona's
Yeah, because you start from pretty. I mean, Flagstaff 7,000 feet to start with, so
Arizona's is 9 miles
Oh yeah.
round trip, and it's yeah.
Yeah, it's right like like Flagstaff is kind of right near the base of it, and that's
It's
where.
about 12th hardest is about where they rank it.
Okay, cool. Well, and let me just say this: if you ever come to Arizona, you're in Phoenix, and you drive from there to the Grand Canyon, which means you drove through the entire center of Yavapai County. You drove right through my domain, and you didn't hey, what's going on? I would have bought you lunch. We would have done something.
And I should have gone that way because honestly, my wife who grew up in that area, she wanted to see Williams on our way
Yeah.
up to the Grand Canyon. So
Yes.
we were going through Williams, and I got my first speeding ticket in my life in Williams.
Okay, so William is Coconino. Okay, was it a Coconino County or was it a highway patrol
I think it was Coconino County.
county? So then, did you
Yeah.
have to? You probably had to do a remote. You're not going to come back and challenge that.
No,
ticket.
I did the call in for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, first everyone I came off the highway there and didn't see the speed drop down.
Well,
So.
we appreciate you leaving some of that money behind for a support
My
the
little
Arizona economy.
donation. Yeah, but yeah,
Well-
I'll definitely be back.
No, in all seriousness, when people are traveling family, yeah. But in all seriousness, if you're ever in that, you know what I'm saying? Love to.
Well,
love
and
to
I
do
want to
that.
see
I was born-
Yavapai.
What's that?
I want to see your college. I mean,
got it.
my wife went to your college.
Mm-hmm.
We obviously have our friend Suki that works there. My wife still has friends that work there.
That's
So
what
we
I'm saying.
definitely have that tie-in.
If she hasn't been around in a while too, there'll be a ton of stuff she wouldn't even recognize here. So we've got some very cool stuff coming this year that I'm kind of pumped about. Okay. Thank you for that answer. That was awesome. Second to last question, as always, is if people wanted to get in contact with you or find out more about what you are up to, how would they go about doing so?
Yeah, so talking about the HETMA community, the easiest way would be advisory@hetma.org. Obviously, I've got my Creighton University email address as well. The easiest one, I've got multiple that will go to the same place, but just chriskelly@creighton.edu is the shortest, easiest one to get to have it come to me.
All right. So,
And then
yeah.
just on the HETMA community as well. Message me on the HETMA site. I'm on there every day. I've got one of those big 100-day or whatever streak things to
Yeah.
prove it. So
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Somewhere out there is another AV person that likes to climb mountains. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? There's someone who wants to talk about that with you. So if you're listening, ping Chris. Let's do this thing.
there's got to be someone.
That's right. All right. And then finally, the last question is, as always, old time newscasters had sign off phrases for their broadcasts like good night and good luck or other things like that. And so, what is Chris Kelly's drop the mic sign off phrase?
I'm that exciting. So it would probably be something like stay curious. And it has the tie-in of, I love the quote, wrongly attributed to Whitman, about be curious, not judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. And it's something I am always reminding myself of, like, slow down. Everyone's got their own junk going on. Why might they have done it instead of that jerk did X? And beyond situations like that, just always wanting to learn more things. There's always more stuff out there to learn instead of just draining out to something. Go learn something. Be curious.
Thank you for listening to the AV IT Amplifier. Join us again for next week's episode when we'll welcome a new guest who you'll want to hear from. We promise. Your host has been Ryan Gray. He's on the tweeters at Ryan_A_Gray, or find him on LinkedIn to connect. Please subscribe and give the show a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by higheredav.com. The views expressed here are not necessarily those of our respective institutions, employers, or sponsors. Everyone hang in there, go easy, and we'll be back next week.